My name is Laura Kantorovich. I am the product director of the employee experience. Again, really happy to be here, be chatting with some of you. And Sandra is from Kuehne+Nagel, a client of ours. We've been working super closely together. Do you want to introduce yourself and what you do?
Yeah. Hi, also from my side. I'm part of our global HRS team, responsible for talent acquisition and talent development systems.
Perfect. Sandra's story is really exciting. So I consider Sandra a friend. She's going to laugh that I say that, but I consider Sandra a friend and an awesome colleague. And so very excited to be chatting about this today. As you all know, our purpose at Phenom is to help 1 billion people find the right job. Sandra is helping us do that with Kuehne+Nagel. We are working together to do that with Kuehne+Nagel. And you know, we've had a lot of conversations and you've heard a ton of content around workforce planning, how Phenom is building solutions to support workforce planning using artificial intelligence. And really this conversation is exciting because Sandra is a partner of ours and we are in the process of making a decision together, and she and her team are in the process of making a decision as to whether or not they're ready to use Phenom for workforce planning. This isn't somebody that has already purchased this product, but we've been actively working together to talk about how this is the right solution, what their specific challenges are, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So hopefully some of this resonates with you. And again, any questions or thoughts that you have, we'll leave some time to talk through that a little bit. I'm going to skip through this, and I'm going to ask Sandra to talk to us a little bit about Kuehne+Nagel and what their organization does.
Yeah, I hope that you had a chance actually to listen to our keynote speaker, our CHRO, yesterday. Then you probably already know what Kuehne+Nagel is doing. However, if not, then we are a global logistics and freight forwarding company. We employ over 80,000 people, over 100 countries, I think 105 to be exact. And we are a global market leader in the sea and air logistics. Next slide. So, how has our journey been? Today, I will focus more on the internal mobility. However, actually, in the beginning of 2018, we focused on reimagining our candidate experience. This was the starting point, our partnership with Phenom. I won't stop too much on there. However, half a year later, we did implement a new or first version of the internal mobility, what we then branded as a Career Explorer. In the beginning, it was really much just an internal job search page. So not so much content, no nice widgets. And actually, we developed this together with Phenom as the product developed. Also, then we developed it to our employees. So today, it's actually a place for all of our employees to go to get all of the career-related recommendations, learning recommendations, but also the information and content in terms of the career development. So a bit of the numbers as well. We do have 80,000 employees, however, half of them are blue collars, which we don't consider, so it's actually around 45,000, which can use Career Explorer. So we have 63% are signed up there, and almost every second employee has applied for an internal job opportunity, which is quite cool, I think. Last year, we also launched a global referral program, and already now we have actually 13,000 referrals, which is also, I think, quite a great result. But of course, we can do better. And now, what are we doing together with Laura? We are thinking how could we leverage that data also on the team view or department level, also organizational level. So how could we really do that better to leverage the internal mobility data?
Awesome.
In the discussions, we have quite a challenges. Maybe not challenges, but also it's a thought process that we have with Laura. How could we do different things? So at the moment, the internal mobility, our Career Explorer, is for employees a really short-term place to go and find a job. They see at the moment the openings which are open now, so most probably they go there at the same time as they're going to the external sites to find a job. However, there is no longer-term planning, at least not in terms of the technology. And also, the challenge for us is what we have to consider in order to move to this longer term. How do we keep our employees motivated to actually update, not only fill out the profile, but also update it, that we could have actually up-to-date data? What is our long-term challenge, what we want to achieve, is that also the department level and organizational level, we would have the skills and the knowledge to match with our development opportunities. That actually we could also see what are the skill gaps for our employees, how could we do different interventions to overcome those skill gaps, and therefore also make our organization more bulletproof. This brings us to the second challenge. What happens if the employees are not filling out their profiles? How could we gather the data somewhere different? Either some different systems, based on the positions, what is their work history, and how could we get the skills and competencies actually to then put it into the organizational level module to see what are the things we need to develop. And then furthermore, how can we then successfully use it in the succession planning or then the strategic workforce management. The third challenge, what we see is we don't in Kuehne+Nagel really believe in this classical career framework as such. We think that it takes quite a lot of time to define positions, skills, then do it organizational level for different groups. And once it's done, it's already outdated most of the times because the maintenance takes a lot of effort. So how could we do such thing in order to apply it to the succession faster, dynamic way that we actually don't need to spend this time and effort, we are quite lean in HR, and still make it meaningful. And I think that's quite a big challenge for us. And the fourth one. Today when Laura was presenting the ERM and the new, I was sitting next to our CHRO, and then he's also aware of our challenges and talks. And his comment was, hey Sandra, how can we actually combine the ERM with other systems? Do you know that? And this is something that keeps me up at night. It's the biggest challenge. How do we define the logical user journeys, then for employee level, the team manager level, organizational level, that they won't need to jump from the system to system, but they would have all of the data in one place. So how would they use the performance management? How would they use learning? How they use ERM? Because ideally, right, it's all in one place where they can actually go and walk around. And that's, I think, quite a tough challenge.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm curious from the crowd here, are these consistent with the challenges, I guess, that you guys have considered as you've heard about this today? I guess raise your hand if any of these challenges resonate. Yeah, absolutely. Feel free, I would be really curious, are there any additional challenges that have come through your mind as you're thinking about some of the products that we're sharing? Just yell them out. I don't believe you if you don't.
We have some more for sure.
Yeah, you do have a bunch. But there are a lot, right? And I think just to kind of, again, underscore what Sandra was chatting about, they've seen Phenom be this product that has worked from them from the acquisition side. They're now looking at it from the talent management side. And these are changes and challenges that are coming up that we're considering working with them. So just to talk about them a little bit more, or just to highlight them again, how do we engage and encourage employees to manage their career, number one? How do we upskill managers to support with this and actually create that change management in the organization? How do we understand individual skills when this is a really cumbersome process? And how do we set up these processes around a skill framework and an architecture framework in a time that's agile and quick and iterative? And then finally, how do we ensure that there is this seamless experience, because we know that there are multiple systems that we currently have, maybe some archaic or outdated solutions that we're still potentially pointing to that we eventually will sunset, but ultimately we want to have one consistent user experience for our employees, for our managers, for our HR partners. That's just good product experience, right? That's pretty baseline. So these were some really great challenges that Sandra brought up, and some of them, again, have been iterated already today, like you heard during our keynote and during a number of many of these other breakout sessions. But time and time again, I think we feel really confident that Phenom is still a great choice. I'm going to talk a little bit through why we believe that and how we have been suggesting to Sandra how we can support with that. And again, because this is a smaller session, please feel free to call out any questions or challenges that you want to bring up as well. I think this graph is really interesting, and I'm going to come back to it time and time again because it always rings true. As I talk to a number of different prospects, everyone and different clients that want to potentially use, I'll stand over here. Actually, let's switch because I need this. that want to use kind of our platform. Everyone wants to be on this innovation side. They really want to be focusing on talent intelligence and automation. They really want to be an organization that is innovative, that is using data to make decisions, so on and so forth. But what's really interesting is the majority of the people that we speak to are actually really in that sort of core talent management. Some are in the evolution talent management space where they are focusing on performance management, where we're focusing on learning and leadership training. About 15% are in this maturation stage of employee engagement and succession planning, but only 5% are in this space, right? This sort of innovative space. So how do we as Phenom help our partners move all the way through this sort of maturation stage with our product, especially because we are building products for this innovation stage. And that requires a lot of change management support, but that also requires us to build products that are easy to use and support all of the different people in your organizations that are going to need to use this to enable that change management to happen. And so here's how we think about it. Really, there are two baseline frameworks that we need to be thinking about. The first is workforce planning, like some of you just maybe heard in the conversation with Signa. As we're thinking about workforce planning, it really has to go across the entire C-suite, across all of the different people in the organization that are sitting at the top that are going to come together and align on this sort of workforce planning approach that we're going to take. And then the second is a skills-first approach. Now, I know I said it before, I was half joking, but skills frameworks are big trigger words for a lot of us, right? We've kind of gone through the process of building out ontologies. It's been very laborsome, it's been very time-consuming, and it hasn't worked. However, we really believe that this is the approach that we want to take because we know that the job architecture and that job framework approach is pretty limiting. And with skills, it enables us to understand who our employees are and how we can help them move throughout the organization. Historically, this has all been manual. If you want to understand who people are and how their skills are assigned to different jobs and so on and so forth, you have to go through this really manual process where a talent manager is talking to somebody in every single department. They're identifying key titles, then competencies to match the roles, then proficiencies to match the competencies. They're publishing a career framework. A manager has no idea what to do with it. It's incredibly time-consuming. It's incredibly laborious. And then it's outdated and archaic. And so how do we solve for that? Again, I spoke to this today, but go back a slide, we have been aggregating data for the past 12 years and training AI models to understand differences between skills, progressions, roles, competencies, proficiencies across the talent acquisition and the talent management space so that we can have a model that is learning in real time. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our data and how that works. So if you don't do this, if you don't have that skills-first approach, if you don't understand who your employees, what their aspirations are, employees are going to leave. We're seeing that 94% of employees would want to stay longer if companies invested in their career. And the only way that we can really invest in careers are if we understand who people are, if we understand what their aspirations are, and then create a mutually beneficial experience where business goals and people goals can come together to help execute. So this is our data framework. You've heard potentially us talk about this a lot, but I think it's really important to make sure that we all kind of understand how this works, because this is ultimately how we build these skill ontologies and these job frameworks, why they are conditional to your specific organization. And I hope demystify some of the preconceived notions about why, why this skill architecture is something that you can or cannot trust, right? So foundational, out of the box, again, 12 years of training data around skill functionality, progression functionality that we've been aggregating not only from the talent acquisition side, but also the talent management side. And then once you start, if you decide to work with Phenom, you go through an implementation process. Effie was just talking about that implementation process. It is not, an out-of-the-box experience. We need to understand the rules and requirements of your organization. But during that implementation process, that's exactly what we do. We understand the nuance of your organization, of the roles that you have, of the skills that you need, and we adjust our data to support that. So we make it conditional for your organization, configurable for your organization. The feedback layer, that human in the loop, is incredibly important, and I'm actually going to tell a quick story about Sandra and the conversation that we were having about this. We were talking to her manager, and her manager said, well, I don't want to necessarily just use all of the skills that you give me. I don't trust that. We have to incrementally deploy this to our organization, to our talent managers. We have to make sure that we can adjust these at any given time. We went back into our product and we actually made sure that we made even more visible the ability for employees, for managers, for hiring managers, for business partners to adjust skills. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's still the person, right? Our data is a framework for you to use and jump off of, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it's people that are going to have to adjust this as needed to work for their organization. And finally, this AI piece, right? The models that we've been talking about, that we've been using and building, that are constantly learning in real time, and that is what's making this not an archaic solution. It's not stagnant, it's not an Excel sheet of data, right? It is data that's learning from each other time and time again. This is, for those that are a bit more potentially technical or systems oriented in the group or want to kind of understand this, I totally get it. Why does this excite you? Let me ask you. For those that don't know, somebody in the crowd just went like this. You love a diagram, me too, wholeheartedly agree. Love it. Take a picture. Yes, the best. It's the best. Well, luckily our analytics has a sort filter, so you're good there. But again, these are all of the data elements that we are using to build an enterprise talent graph. And that enterprise talent graph is data that we can collect and leverage with anybody that uses Phenom to provide them with information about their organization that they may not know already. I'll share that. I'll share some information for you in that in a second. But in addition to that, then you have this sort of filter layer where you have, again, these career frameworks from market trends. You have a rule engine that we've created that can be adjusted based on your specific organizational requirements. If you want to weigh more heavily work experience versus education experience, right? Those are all rule engines that you're able to adjust. Org hierarchy, and then historical movements, really looking to see who has moved in different places in your organization, what have their skills been. So this is how it kind of looks under the hood. And this is kind of our approach, right? Our approach is we want to make sure that you are able to understand what these skills are. You're able to really personally roll out based on that maturity stage in the organization, that graph that I showed you earlier, identifying where you are in that maturity stage and leaning into it. As Cigna had shared earlier, they had a lot of kind of alignment that they had to create across their C-suite to make sure everybody was already kind of on board. Maybe you're a stage ahead of that, maybe you're a stage behind that, quote unquote. And identifying where you are and then working with us to really be able to build out a plan for that. Working with agility, so how do we make sure that you are testing these solutions? How do you identify one specific department in the organization that you want to roll out with? And then testing how that works, testing what those skills look like, testing what the managers in those organizations, how they perceive what that experience looks like, the talent managers perceive that, and the employees, and kind of testing it out that way. If you have a timeline, how do you kind of work backwards, right? How do you work backwards to say, here are all of the different systems that we're potentially going to sunset, here are all the email campaigns that we need to adjust in order to point people to, different endpoints where they're going to be updating their profile, versus all the other subsequent experiences. And that goes to building that consistent experience, right? Taking that holistic approach and understanding what are all of the systems that we have, where are all the places that we're pointing somebody to build a profile or to look at organizational data, and how do we make sure we're mapping that to one consistent experience. And so we're gonna share some projected outcomes that I actually shared with Sandra for the first time the other day, and I just recommended to her when we chat with a new CHRO that's coming in to her organization a few weeks that we share with too, right? So these are the data points that Sandra and Kuehne+Nagel have identified after they rolled out internal mobility talent marketplace at their organization. This is without any of the kind of enterprise intelligence that we've spoken about today. This is truly just with human input. So they have 80,000 employees, roughly, she said half of those are frontline workers, may not have this profile. So within all of those, there are around 6% of them have filled out their profile, right? Pretty baseline number. The averages that I've seen are around 30%, right? For those that have Workday or SAP or any other kind of ATSs, it's around 30% of people will go out and fill out a profile even after you send all of the emails to kind of recommend people to do that. You have 13,000 people applying, 20 or sending referrals, 21,000 people applying, and then roughly 3 skills per profile. I want to underscore that just for a second, 3 skills per profile. So we kind of have this high level data about each of these individuals. Okay, this is with the inferred data that Phenom has about Kuehne+Nagel because they are a client with us. I shared with you all the kind of enterprise talent graphs, how we are inferring data, how we're collecting data without organizations necessarily having to do anything. So we went from 3 skills per employee to having over 140 skills grouped in 514 skill categories. That means that we're able to assign different skills to different skill categories, and they now have a much more robust selection of skills that are associated to each role without their employees having to go in and update their profile. What does that actually mean? What are you going to do with those skills? It means that we can provide your employees with personalized recommendations about either jobs to look for in the organization, about upskilling opportunities to take, so on and so forth. And then obviously it enables your managers and your talent managers to understand more about these individuals as well. We have 30,000 employees with potential succession plans. So for those of you who were in the keynote today, we had those progressions listed out. So we were able to identify a number of different progressions for 30,000 individuals just by looking at the data that they already had. And 53% of those employees, we were able to infer next roles for succession plans. So this was without having to do any data whatsoever, or any work whatsoever. On Sandra's side, this was just because they were a Phenom client. We had their data. We were able to use our data on top of that. And again, this is not ready to go live into production. We have to do a big, would have to do a scrape and really analyze this data to see how it matches, but the baseline is there, right? If you think about how long it potentially could take you to come up with 30,000 employee succession plans, you guys could answer that. So that's just kind of the process that we would take. So we have a few minutes left. Again, know that it's the end of the day, the end of a very long conference with a lot of information. But we can answer a few questions. Feel free to ask questions directly for Sandra as well to hear her opinion. But yeah, let's get going. Go ahead.
Can you go back to the slide?
Sure.
I don't have much of a voice.
I know.
Is there any consideration given
Excuse me.
employee performance?
Ooh.
Top performers and low performers?
So with the data that you see here, no, not yet. Because that is not data that the organization has provided to us yet. We aren't able to see or understand who's a top performer or low performer yet. That's qualitative data that is incredibly important that we cannot ignore. And it's interesting you bring that up because one of the main challenges, well, you explain it, go ahead.
I think that's actually the phase one for us as well, or that's what we want to see, how we combine that data. Also, not only the performance data, but also the feedback maybe, which is more than qualitative, besides just the organizational structure and the historical data for the employees.
So Kuehne+Nagel actually just signed on with a third-party system that does performance data. So the question was, how do we pull that data into your data and merge it together? Two different options, right? You could do a batch file where you're scraping all of the data, do a plug and play once, twice, every quarter, where you're taking that data, push it in there, right? Or we also have the opportunity to do an API integration where we're able to pull that data consistently. So longer answer to your question, but no, but it absolutely, that's something that needs to be considered, right? Great question. Yeah? No?
So you talked earlier about skills, competencies, and principles. But just seeing skills, where is that data?
So I'm going to repeat your question for myself, but also for those in the room potentially as well. So the question was, I spoke about skills, progressions, and competencies. You're just seeing projected skill data where it's the competency data. So again, competencies are very specific for organizations, right? They have different frameworks rolled out already that we cannot project on because they are nuanced for every organization. So that would be part of the conversation that we would have with Sandra and team. What are your competencies? How do we roll these out? Once we understand how those competencies map to different skills, we potentially could create models to roll off of that, but without that information, because Kuehne+Nagel just has internal mobility right now and none of that data, that's something that we potentially could project. Anything you want to add?
I think this is also the assessment data, right? We are using a different assessment providers which have the competence frameworks, and it's also how will we don't know, actually then integrate into the Phenom platform. But this would be the other source of the data besides, again, performance data, assessment data, also probably, maybe our next question is about the learning data. We're also thinking about that. How do we actually do that?
Mm-hmm. And again, the answer is going to be consistent, right? You have to make sure all of your data is in one place, regardless of what that data is. If you have data in disparate places, you want it in one place. The question is, do you want to pull all of that data once, or do you want to have an integration, right, where that data is coming through? That question goes back to experience. Do you want people to come back to your platform, to the Phenom platform potentially, or do you want them to go to different places? And you can build experiences based on all of that, but that's ultimately how we start thinking about that. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry for already.
No.
Before I missed the beginning of the session, but
Yeah.
do you ask your employees to fill
Nobody is.
So I'm just wondering how do you get to that then?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a challenge for us as well. Yeah, we are doing different email campaigns on internal mobility to fill the data. We will have actually a new one coming up because the career, like the internal mobility profile, will really be the one place for our entire organization where they can enter the data such as resume, work history, and also their career preferences, right? Which is quite an important part determining the succession plans.
Yeah. Ultimately, the profile, everything comes back to what's in it for me, right? K&N right now only has a profile for searching for a new job. So what does that mean? When people are looking for a new job, they're gonna go and fill out that profile. You're only looking for a new job, hopefully, right? Once a year, maybe a little bit more, but like it's a very infrequent use of what's in it for me. That's why having a full talent management platform where you are inviting people to come back in and say, fill this out because it's helping with your own development, excuse me, is incredibly important. I'm going to answer your question, maybe if my voice doesn't crack right now, it will. We have uploads from LinkedIn. Excuse me. And we also do integrations into your ATSs. Thank you all so much. Please feel free to reach out. We love your feedback. We love your questions. Anything that we can do to support, we are here for it. And thank you so much to Sandra for coming on stage and kind of being vulnerable and sharing all this information with us. Thank you all.
Thank you.